My sister mocked me for marrying a lowly farmer, while her husband was a finance genius. When their investments collapsed, my parents demanded I sell my land to bail them out. Their faces turned ghostly white when my husband explained who the actual landowner was. Prat 1. The champagne flutes clinked around me as my sister Tamara's voice carried across the reception hall, dripping with that special brand of sweetness that could cut glass. The laughter that followed hit me like a slap, and I felt my cheeks burn as 200 wedding guests turned to look at me in Peyton. My name is Bethany, and that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I should have known Tamara wouldn't let my wedding pass without reminding everyone exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. There she was, radiant in her designer bridesmaid dress, holding court at the head table, while I sat there in my grandmother's altered wedding gown, trying not to let the tears show. Bethany, honey, smile. My mother Rosalie hissed from beside me, her perfectly manicured fingers digging into my arm. People are watching. Though of course they were watching. They'd been watching my whole life, waiting to see which Blair sister would stumble first. Spoiler alert, it was always going to be me. Peyton's calloused hand found mine under the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. When I looked at him, his brown eyes were steady and kind, completely unbothered by the snickers echoing around us. Let them laugh, he murmured, leaning close enough that his breath tickled my ear. We know what we have. God, I loved this man, even covered in a thin layer of dust from the fields he'd been working that morning. Because yes, he'd insisted on checking the irrigation system on our wedding day. He was more real than anyone in this room, full of pressed suits and fake smiles. I still can't believe you're marrying a farmer, my younger sister Erin whispered, sliding into the empty chair beside me. At 27, she was the diplomatic one, always trying to smooth over the family's rough edges. I think it's romantic, but Mum's been popping antacids all week. Thanks for the pep talk, I said, watching Tamara work the crowd like she was running for office. At 31, she had perfected the art of being the golden child Stanford corner office in Manhattan, husband who wore $1,000 suits and talked about market volatility at dinner parties. That's not what I meant, Erin said quickly. Just, ladies and gentlemen. My father Donald's voice boomed through the microphone, cutting through the chatter. He stood at the podium, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression somewhere between resigned and disappointed. I'd like to say a few words about my daughter, Bethany. My stomach dropped. This couldn't be good. Bethany has always been unique, he began, and I caught Tamara smirking behind her champagne glass. While her sisters focused on their careers and achievements, Bethany chose a different path, a simpler path. The word, simpler, hung in the air like a judgment. I felt Peyton's grip tighten on my hand. She's chosen to marry Peyton, a man who works with his hands and understands the value of hard work. Donald's pause felt deliberate, calculated. We wished them happiness in their humble life together. The applause was polite but lukewarm. I caught my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, though I wasn't sure if they were tears of joy or mourning. Your dad's really laying it on thick, Peyton said quietly, his voice steady despite the insult wrapped in wedding wishes. Who's been practicing that speech for weeks? I replied, watching Tamara lean over to whisper something to her husband Elijah. They both laughed, and I didn't need to hear the words to know they were about me. This was my family. The people who should have been celebrating with me were instead treating my wedding like a funeral for my potential. Every achievement I'd ever earned, my college degree, my teaching awards, the small business I'd built selling organic produce. All of it dismissed, because I'd chosen love over status. You know what? I said, standing up so abruptly that my chair scraped against the floor. The sound cut through the reception chatter, and suddenly everyone was looking at me again. I raised my water glass, because of course I was too practical to waste good champagne on a toast, and looked directly at my sister. To family, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. And to learning who really has your back when it matters. Tamara's smile faltered for just a moment, but she recovered quickly, raising her glass with the rest of the room. The toast felt like a line drawn in the sand, though I don't think anyone else realized it yet. As I sat back down, Peyton leaned over and whispered, "That's my girl." I had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. 3 years later, I stood in Tamara's marble, tiled foyer holding a casserole dish that probably cost less than her doormat. The annual Blair family barbecue was in full swing, and I could already hear the familiar soundtrack of my childhood: clinking glasses, forced laughter, and the subtle art of one-upmanship disguised as conversation. "Bethany." My mother's voice rang out as I stepped onto the pristine back patio. "There you are. We were just talking about the Hamptons house Tamara and Elijah bought." Of course they were. Tamara glided over in a flowing white sundress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile was as perfectly maintained as her landscaping. "Oh, you brought food," she said, eyeing my casserole dish like it might contain something contagious. "Green bean casserole," I said, setting it down on the catering table next to the professionally prepared spread. "From our garden." "Is it organic?" Elijah appeared beside his wife, martini in hand, his polo shirt so crisp it could cut paper. "Or just basic?" The question hung in the air while several family friends turned to listen. I felt that familiar heat creeping up my neck. "Who's homegrown?" Peyton said quietly, stepping up beside me. His jeans were clean but worn, his button-down shirt simple cotton.